All right, guys, we are live. As the viewers can see, I am in an unusual place. I'm here in the flesh with my co-host Brand BTC over here in Nashville at the BTC Media offices. I'm joined by a fantastic crew here of awesome Bitcoiners, and we're going to be joined by Ansel Lindner in a little bit as well to top it off. But right now we have Croesus, BTC, we have Joe Rogers, and we have Michael Tanguma of Unchained Capital. So we have an awesome show lined up for y'all. Again, I'm CK. This is Brand BTC, and this is Drinks in Quarantine. Before we get into the actual show, we do have a couple of drinking rules. So if you say these particular words, you have to drink, and really the rules are made to be broken, but we have two rules today. First is the Brian Armstrong rule, so you can't say Bitcoin, and second is you can't say drink. So if you say Bitcoin or drink, you gotta drink, so I'll drink to that. Cheers.
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 And CK, can I just say that the studio lighting is just, your face is glistening, so really excited to have you here.
Yeah, it's a lot better than my dungeon of an office. So
You're glowing.
you know, it's because of these lights right here, right next to my face. It's a lot hotter in here though. But yeah, guys, what a crazy week. What a crazy 2 or 3 weeks. Who here is feeling bullish?
I'm feeling pretty bullish.
Oh yeah, super bullish right now.
This is raising two hands up.
Yeah.
I can feel it.
What in particular is getting you guys juiced right now? There's a lot going on.
I got a personal anecdote.
All right.
My dad, who his neck is as red as my shirt, he called me and said he wanted to stack some sats. He has some cash sitting around in an old IRA. He's like, son, let's do something with it. I'm going to just trust you. I don't want to hold the passwords. You just do it for me. And I said, Dad, let's rock and roll. So we're going to make a move next week.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm feeling bullish on the business aspect of it, right? Like seeing what Saylor did, just put, that he's referenced it. I don't know if it was on PompSpot or the Real Vision where he referenced the 4-minute mile, that once somebody saw it done, then everybody's like, hey, I can do this, which doesn't necessarily make much critical sense if you think about it, right? If your cash was always melting, it was always fucking melting. But basically, hearing, seeing businesses all across the board, whether they're holding 100,000 cash or dollars, see that there's potential for them to, get allocated to, an asset that is going to increase in value or at least not lose value is been incredibly bullish.
Yeah. So what I find most interesting right now is the lag between how clear the near future is starting to look for Bitcoin and where the price is. And that things are just not priced in and haven't been priced in since before the halving, before Paul Tudor Jones, before MicroStrategy, before Square, before Fidelity says 5% should be in Bitcoin. And that means that things have to catch up to where the world is now. And that's just a great place to be holding.
Yeah, you know what they call that in the business? Opportunity.
Wait, you're saying Square buying 50 million wasn't priced in?
Well, I'm saying that we basically are still at the same price level that we were at before the halving. We're effectively still at the equilibrium price from the previous reward era. So everything that has happened since is not priced in.
Yeah.
I would tend to agree with that, and I would actually push back about the 4-minute mile thing. I think what Saylor and his team did was show that you can put in $500 million and not, really make a ripple in the price, and that Bitcoin is liquid enough to do that, and you can start allocating that kind of money. Maybe a lot of Bitcoiners knew that. Maybe people that were in China, messing with hash knew that, but I don't think a lot of corporate CEOs knew that. And now all of a sudden, Bitcoin's not just magical internet money, but holy shit, it's super liquid. And Saylor and his team did really show that you can do that, and no one will notice until you announce.
Yep.
Well, I meant more from the 4-minute mile that it can be done or was done, right? So some people never had any.
Like now, all these corporate teams know that it can be done and that it is liquid enough.
Yeah, even in Bitcoin, we weren't talking about how a next step of adoption was going to be corporate treasuries. Like, I don't think. I mean, Preston was talking about that, but it wasn't concrete. And then Michael Saylor just made it concrete, and so the 4-minute mile has been established now.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the fascinating things about this whole, as Bitcoiners, I think we all like to pride ourselves on, being smart or forward thinking, but nobody was really talking about this whole like corporate treasury as the next kind of wave of adoption or was going to spark. We're talking about, potentially just high net worth individuals, the institutions are coming, but to hear, it can be, mom and pop shop that's been holding cash for a while, or these, corporate Fortune 500 companies that start looking at this because they're sitting on a pile of cash. I think that's what's been really fascinating, that the whole narrative changed within the past, 2 months.
Have you guys spent any time on Bitcoin Treasuries? The new website?
Yeah.
It's cool.
I
mean,
refresh
That's
every day.
Rodolfo's deal, right?
Yeah. So, Michael, tell the viewers what it is.
Yeah, so essentially, I think Rodolfo put it together from the CoinKite team, but it's showing, I believe it's public companies, not just the United States. I know there's some in Canada, but essentially that are holding Bitcoin on their balance sheet.
A bunch of Canada.
Yeah, a bunch of Canada, right? Like 3IQ, a fund up there. But you got like the Square, MicroStrategy. So pull it up, see who else is on there.
Low key, Galaxy's been a public company that has been holding Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies for a long time. I mean, I guess they're, obviously an investment fund, so a little bit different, but
Also based in Canada.
yeah, I guess.
Guys, do we need to face the fact that the Canadian Bitcoin community is better at talking about Bitcoin than us Americans?
What do you mean?
I don't know. It's just like so many of these companies are Canadian, not American.
Yeah.
Are they
Per
beating
capita,
us?
They're ahead.
Well, Canadians have also been really, really hurting on the hard money front for a while. So it seems like a fringe minority is gone extreme into Bitcoin.
Yeah, I would also imagine there's a regulatory component of there, right? Like that's why Galaxy ran up there to set up the institutional kind of like going public. So I would imagine that's a portion of it as well.
Also, you also have to think about how in America we have that exorbitant privilege of the dollar, and so the benefits of Bitcoin are not quite as salient to the average American. So maybe that's part of it.
Yeah. As far as like, when it comes to businesses, where do you guys feel like fits within that persona? We see Square. That's really interesting, right? Like you obviously have to have like positive cash flow to actually allocate. You have to be somewhat forward thinking, we would think. But where do you guys fit? Like who do you see as the next or the type of company that would
cash
be
flow to allocate, by the way.
to Bitcoin?
Yeah, you just need to have cash.
Well, if you think of some of these firms, right, that aren't bleeding cash, we think of like Ubers of the world and some of these companies that, they try to convince their board that they're already losing, millions and billions of dollars a year, that they're going to move into some nascent market. I feel like it'd be a lot harder to sell than some of it's, positive.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was like thinking, like something like Apple, but I guess the distinction, Apple has a lot of cash, but they also have a lot of debt. So probably someone who's more like I guess there's two kind of personas, right? Kind of like Square, where they were already Bitcoining. They were pretty much doing everything other than allocating to it publicly. So, I would say like they're deep into the tech. And then on the flip side is in the ecosystem. And then on the flip side is like the Michael Saylors, where heavy cash, maybe not a good business model for the current time, just kind of floating along, like needed to do something, see their cash, like, their biggest asset burning away. Obviously, Michael was like a prime CEO that was in a position where he has like made big changes like that before, like kind of like on the flip of the switch. So, if you can see other public companies that, maybe they're slowing down, maybe there's some stagnation in their business model and they got a lot of cash and no debt, like, that's the formula.
One thing I'd add too is, I had actually tweeted this, so apologies for shilling myself here, but I tweeted about a week ago, watch out for stock buyback regulation to force more companies to dip their toes into Bitcoin treasury. I was talking to our CEO about, that exact topic. And one thing that he brought up is actually the COVID relief packages that a lot of these PPP grants that companies are getting. There is built into that some regulation around stock buybacks just in and of itself. And so we could already start seeing some of these companies that took a little money and then end up, being in a better financial place afterwards, maybe even more incentivized to dip their toes into the Bitcoin treasury game a little bit.
So are we paying for their Bitcoin? Is that what you're saying?
Well, is the budget balanced? If the budget's balanced, then yeah. But if not, then we're paying through the Cantillon effect.
I'd love some of that sweet government money for some Bitcoin holdings.
Yeah, true.
I mean, but if you look at Michael Saylor, and sorry, Croesus, but I mean, they did two things: bought Bitcoin, bought back their stocks. That's what they did with the cash. So if you can't buy back your stock, then maybe Bitcoin's your only option.
Yeah, I think that the other big thing in the MicroStrategy story is that Michael Saylor has controlling interest voting rights. That means that he can do whatever he wants, really. He has to get, some level of buy-in, but he gets to push through whatever he wants. And that's a very uncommon thing with public companies. So in terms of who's next, I think my eye is on the unknown companies. Like, I didn't know who MicroStrategy was before this summer. And I think there's probably other billion-dollar public companies like that who are controlled by one individual who's going to get orange-pilled, and that's how it happens. And then the Apples and the larger companies that don't have like a charismatic single leader who has a controlling interest, they will be later in the flow of people.
How long until a FANG company is holding it on their balance sheet?
Great question. I think somebody was talking about this, that if you decided today, if you're a public company and you decide today that you're interested in maybe moving some treasury amount into Bitcoin, how long is it going to take you to actually execute on that? All the steps you have to do as a person are, you have to then add in some very slow steps of consensus building and bringing board members into that idea. And, Michael Saylor he assigned homework and reading to his board, and you're going to have to go through all that, have lots of conversations, and that's going to take time. So I can't see it faster than 6 months between thinking maybe this is a good idea and then actually doing it. So maybe that starts now.
Sorry. I was just going to add, there's also the component of like the size of the asset right now and the size of those companies, right? So Michael Saylor was for their balance sheet because of their market cap, and then for Square, it was more, if you read the thing, it was like more ideological, right? For like an open, monetary system and all the things they believe in. It wasn't necessarily for their actual like balance sheet.
Yeah,
so from these large, for the tech, but like for these large companies, I think that the asset has to be, orders of magnitude larger before they can sell it as something that would affect their balance sheet. So I would look towards more of like the private companies, right? Like these private companies, again, that are forward thinking that can do it. But what's really interesting or fascinating for me is like how fast he got orange pilled. Is like how quick he was, right? And then what that means from like Bitcoin's just pure incentive game theoretical system, where now who is he incentivized to go reach out to and talk to? Because everybody's pinging him in his DMs. Like that's the fascinating part, and how quick those guys can move in the next 6 to 12 months. That's the stuff that like I think is going to move the market.
Something else bullish about that, the velocity of him getting orange pilled. I mean, the guy's super brilliant, but it just shows you that maybe the rails are built now for much faster education of people. Now the educational base has been built, the writing has been written. all the people that influenced Michael Saylor, their writing's out there. It's very easy to find and grasp. We have the Bitcoin Standard now. We have all these like educational on ramps that we didn't have in 17 and before. So maybe we see, this, add to the velocity of the orange build.
We got Hodl and Breedlove creating a documentary, man. We're gonna take this to AMC or whatever theater's still left.
Saylor was chilling with Breedlove, man. I mean, that's pretty rad.
I mean, I was gonna say like 2017 was pre-Bitcoin Standard, pre every person that's been writing about Bitcoin for the past like 18 months writing about Bitcoin. There was a handful of people writing about Bitcoin before 2017 happened. Like that number has absolutely exploded. Like,
and they all wrote at Bitcoin Magazine.
I mean, it really is like crazy. Like here we are at Bitcoin Magazine. We were like the only game in town at one point, and now several massive organizations have crypto only divisions and Bitcoin only divisions. And I'll drink to say Bitcoin, but like the scale at which Bitcoin memes and Bitcoin knowledge is being like distilled down and distributed it's just unbelievable, and it's probably the most bullish thing out of all of this. Like that is the impotence of why we're talking about all this.
So
and we're not done either. Like that continues to trend. I think that the messaging continues to get synthesized and distilled into tighter and tighter memes, and then that's when it's as obvious as like the number zero. Like how do you go from a world that doesn't have the number zero to everybody understanding as this idea as something that's obvious and well indoctrinated into society?
If I could if I could pour just a little bit more bullish juice on all of this, I got one thing that I haven't heard enough people talk about, and that is that we kind of mentioned Michael Saylor was non-consensus with this decision. He was able to do it because he's like a sole kind of controller of his company. One thing I didn't see was a whole bunch of reputable people coming out and saying, Michael Saylor, you're an idiot. And if you think about any other time in Bitcoin's history when it hits mainstream, everyone's like, if you're in Bitcoin, you're in a scam. This time it didn't happen. And, if you were expecting a whole bunch of companies to see what he did and think, oh yeah, this is a great idea, you would hear crickets from them because they're hustling right now to figure out how they can get involved and get their position set before they, want to say anything. And so, when you're talking about this ultimate bull case scenario where, Michael Saylor says all this stuff, people all start paying attention, companies are scrambling to figure out how they can do it too. This would be the exact sort of, outside of that bubble things that are happening. Like, it's crazy to me that you didn't have 1,000 different, pontificators come out and be like, Michael Saylor is really going to regret doing this, and like maybe I'm just blind and didn't see him, but I didn't see him.
Well, that could be because nobody really picked it up.
I mean, it could be, but we picked it up.
I hear what
big
you're
time.
saying. Yeah, but like the mainstream media was definitely not. It was really weird how they did not pick up that versus like at least Square, they had to. Like it literally would have looked very bad. But the MicroStrategy, like $425 million public company, or to put $425 million and it not hit anything was pretty strange.
Yeah. Well, and even with Square though, like, have you guys seen a whole bunch of negative press about them buying Bitcoin? I haven't seen anything.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's crazy to me. I mean, that's crazy. These are public companies that are holding Bitcoin on the balance sheet and no one is batting an eye. I mean, holy cow.
I think part of that is like you see the, on the two separate days that MicroStrategy made their announcements of their, the first piece and then the second piece, each day their stock was up 10%. So, if you're a financial journalist and you're seeing like, well, I was gonna say this was a terrible idea, but they've almost recouped their cost in their market cap just because the market was excited about this news. So, maybe it's a good idea. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. Who knows why they didn't write about it? But
just throwing it out there, they're buying back stock when they're announcing this.
Also true, yes.
We don't know if it was necessarily the market saying, "Oh, Bitcoin number."
Well, the second time, I know they were buying back their stock as part of the first announcement, but I don't remember if that was true of the second announcement as well.
It was buy Bitcoin, buy back stock, buy more Bitcoin with the rest of the money.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Well, it didn't
Yeah.
hurt.
And Brand, to your point, like I think just as the course of this year, the crazy stuff we've seen has opened up the consciousness of people to be like, well, what is crazy? Like, what does exist? What is money? Like all these kind of things that people are actually questioning is for the past 6 months. They've actually had the time. It's not just like theory. Like people are saying, I've been sitting at home for 6 months wondering why somebody printed $3 trillion and like what I'm going to do about this and what this means for me. So yeah, it's an incredible time for people to actually look back and like actually sit down and see what's going on.
Yeah,
I've
especially
never. Go on, Chris's.
I was just going to add that like when you're most of the people in my like establishment liberal network are still very confused why the stock market is doing so well, and so like that, seeing that and then seeing house prices going up in the suburbs and being confused by that too, because it's a pandemic. Who's like, why is the housing market doing great? People are questioning like what is happening with all the printing that we've done, and the fact is that 22% of all dollars in existence were printed this year.
And while peaceful riots are going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never had an easier time explaining Bitcoin than I have in
Yep.
the past 6 months. I mean, it's just the story is telling itself.
I mean,
Completely agree.
Bitcoin is becoming a product that sells itself. It's quite easy. And
What's the product that's selling itself?
Oh yeah, you got me. But speaking of the corn, one of our favorite public companies that's yet to announce that they have put corn on their balance sheet, and when I say corn, I mean Bitcoin, on their balance sheet is Fidelity, but they have recommended to everyone else to allocate 5%. I mean, Fidelity, again, is one of these companies that was really early on the Bitcoin game. They're in it for the tech or the money or whatever, but they've been in it real early. I'm surprised that they aren't making bigger waves, but this was a pretty, kind of big moment for them saying, like, hey, everyone should be holding Bitcoin. Like, what do you guys think of this announcement? And to build off of that, is Fidelity going to add Bitcoin to their balance sheet sometime soon? Let's go to Joe.
I think they will. I don't know how soon though. It's interesting because I think they've already built out the capability to do some custodying and on the institutional side, but they haven't done much to scratch retail's back. But I feel like this is just kind of planting the seeds that it's coming. So I'm excited about it, and I feel like out of all the big, securities custodians out there, I think that they will be leading the way, and then the other dominoes will fall in place shortly thereafter. I mean, we saw that whenever fees started dropping on trading securities, they all fell in line very, very quickly because it's hyper competitive. And I think once one of these big houses brings retail on board, custodying Bitcoin, I think that all the others will fall in line shortly thereafter.
Totally agree.
Chris, go ahead.
Joe, were you referencing their Fidelity filed for permission to do a Bitcoin fund for $100,000 minimum to accredited investors about 2 months ago? Was that what you were talking about? Or
I was referring to that, as well as they had announced their digital assets group being built in house.
right?
I can't recall off the top of my head, but I do believe that they are doing more in the institutional space.
Yeah.
But just not just for the average retail investor.
Right. I think they're starting that way, and I think that them coming out and saying everyone should have some Bitcoin means that they've finished up setting up their infrastructure in house. To be able to offer that to their wealthy clients.
It's an unofficial press release.
Exactly. And now they're going to start generating interest within their own client base of, okay, yeah, how do I do that? Can you help me? And now they have the solution to do that. So,
I mean, now you've got an army of Fidelity employees who are going to be armed with that in their back pocket. So they're going to be telling customers, hey, now we're suggesting 5%. Their customers are going to be saying, well, where do I get it?
yep.
So just not to rain on the parade, but like they came out today to confirm that they weren't necessarily saying to allocate 5%. They were just they put the model from 1 to 5% in like what it was part of a standard 60-40 portfolio of stocks and bonds, and then how that would affect. So it wasn't, I know it's like maybe, apples and oranges, but like, or not too different, but just in the same, they came out to say that they weren't telling people, they're not like telling their, what do they do, like 3.2 trillion assets under management. They weren't saying to do that, but at the same time, yeah, I see what you're saying. Like, it's Fidelity.
We weren't telling
everybody
them,
knows Fidelity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I can give a personal anecdote, my mom, I'm going to dox her. My mom is a customer of Fidelity. She's got like her retirement account there, whatever. And back in 2017, I was trying to convince my mom to dip her toes into the Bitcoin world a little bit. And she was like, I'll consider this. And she brought it to her Fidelity asset, advisor. And advisor was basically just like, yo, no. Why would you ever, don't buy Bitcoin. It's a scam. And just totally was basically flippant, like not even taking the thought seriously. And so at least from that perspective, going from that in 2017 to where, now all of a sudden we've got, maybe not giving direct advice to buy it, but at least, being able to model it in a portfolio of this is what a successful portfolio looks like. I mean, that in and of itself is just a huge change of sentiment.
Yep.
Yeah, it's huge that, you have that Fidelity name that everybody knows from like a legacy financial system. They have their 401k, they have their IRA sitting there, and then you're saying Fidelity has tied their name. What's interesting, I'd be interested to hear your guys take on Fidelity back. Like, the institutional providers are going to be there. The Michael Saylors, these large companies are going to use them. That's cool. Number will go up. But what I'm interested in is, do you guys sit with a corporate treasury should hold their keys, or should it go in some institutional quote unquote grade security or platform, and then you deal with them because it's insured and everything will be okay?
They need to hire a bunch of us Bitcoiners on Twitter. That's what they need to do, and we'll figure it out for them. That's a good question, though. I mean, I think that this whole key custodian business is going to continue to evolve very rapidly. I mean, man, it's so crazy because Bitcoin's a bear's asset, right? And there's just so much risk if you lose it. If you lose it, it's gone for good. So that's a great question, Michael.
I guess the reason I bring it up is because it's something that stuck in my head when I think right after it happened, there was like a tweet thread with Odell and some of the Unchained team. And I think Rodolfo was like, hey, back and forth, like, would you, trust somebody? Would you trust yourself to hold $425 million in Bitcoin? It's like, well, I sure as hell wouldn't fucking trust anybody else with it, right? So I found that people sit on either side of that. So just curious to kind of see where you guys are, if you would, custody it with somebody that's insured and has that kind of stature as a Fidelity or like ICE, or you would want to work with somebody that holds your keys, or you hold your keys as a component of it.
So, and we want to welcome Ansel to the conversation as well. But before we do, I'll jump in and real quick, my take on all of this is, if you're a small company, hey Ansel, a small company who, there's like a level of trust among everyone who's there, holding your keys at that company is not that crazy. But if you're, say, a Goldman Sachs, and you've got a huge, Bitcoin treasury that you're sitting on, and it's like one or two guys that have the keys to that, that is in my opinion, you can't do that. So while I'm all about the not your keys, not your coins, I think some of these entities are too big and not enough trust within the actual entity itself to be able to hold their own coins.
I'm assuming Michael has opposite opinion, seeing as though Unchained has positioned themselves to serve a different need.
I mean, outside of Unchained, I just think of $425 million of your corporate balance sheet. If the company goes insolvent, if something happens, what position do you want to be in? Do you want to be in control of your own fate? Do you want to control with keys, with custody, with logic, no matter Unchained or somebody else? Or do you want some kind of, 08 crisis happen, and then you look and the company says, hey, sorry, man, that was it. It's gone. We're closing up shop. So I think that's the real question, where do you want to place your funds? And that's the beautiful part about Bitcoin is it's the protocol, you can actually build things like this on it, where you can have a set of people within an organization that can control it. You can touch, you can have checks and balances, and you don't have to rely on some party that's, that essentially holding your asset.
That's a good point. And, to that point, multi-sig is a much better solution than a lot of solutions. And, when we were talking about this in the office back in, 2018 maybe, and we were like, if you were a huge institution, how would you even go about setting up a custodianship to hold Bitcoin? Like, eventually it's going to be some person who's going to at least have some control over that money in the institution. And it's just like the liability of that would be too great until there are better solutions built out. And like, Caravan obviously is one of those good solutions. But yeah. Ansel, curious to hear what your thoughts are.
Well, I think there will be all sorts of different solutions, a spectrum of options, terms of service for all these different companies. And there will be insurance as well. I mean, one of the big things that I think kind of has set this year apart is that a lot of these companies were able to get insurance for their Bitcoins. So if you can replace, market value Bitcoins when they get hacked or something, that's a big difference as well. So, yeah, there will probably be a spectrum.
Are they actually getting insurance, or is it some like marketing insurance? But you know what I'm saying, like insurance by name, but not really. It's very shallow, or it's just the hot wallet or something like that.
And when the insurers be solvent if they need to actually fulfill on their obligations.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a big question, and I think that these companies that are holding Bitcoin for people will see some big failures. I don't expect this to be just like the first iteration we get it right. It'll probably be 5-10 years where we'll see some big failures and people will get screwed. So if you don't want to learn that way, then let other people learn and just hodl your stack and wait.
I have a question about that specifically. Do you guys know if the insurance is like, are the Bitcoins insured or the dollar value of the Bitcoins insured? Does anyone know?
Probably policy by policy. I would anticipate it's Bitcoin, or it's the dollar value, but I doubt you can get an insurer to denominate a policy in BTC.
There's like there's a sick hyper bullish scenario that I've batted around in my head before, which is like, say Coinbase is fully insured with the amount of Bitcoins that are sitting on Coinbase, and then some hacker runs away with them, and then Coinbase gets this huge insurance policy paid out, I think like by the FDIC, like I don't even know. And then do they turn around and market buy Bitcoin with that? Like, is this some huge liquidity crisis in Bitcoin if an exchange like that gets hacked with insurance? I don't know.
Good question. Well, KuCoin is going through that right now. They that $150 million hack a couple weeks ago, they're insured. So as far as I know, they still have Bitcoin withdrawals and activity turned off on their exchange. I think that they are probably OTC buying right now through their insurance provider, trying to get that stack rebuilt before they go live again. So that's happening right now.
Anybody listening, I mean, this is the whole reason why you need to take your keys off an exchange, period. Like if you're paying attention to this, simply, and I've had this conversation all week, so it's funny we're chatting about it now, but like you have counterparty risk on the downside and the upside. On the downside, if they're swimming naked and you have a Quadriga incident where they've been insolvent for however long they were, and on the upside with all the FAFTA conversation that you may not be able to take your Bitcoin off, like eventually once they start whitelisting these addresses and you can't like take them off. So you're either way, like there's reason why you should never have your Bitcoin on an exchange after you purchase it. So just want to make that disclaimer out there.
I mean, I think everyone here agrees with that, right? But it's just so much more nuanced than that once it's not an individual.
Is it though? It's like to what Ansel said, like at some point some custodian goes insolvent and then they were the one that touched the stove, and then everybody else learns that it's still not your keys, not your coins. If it's 100 million or a billion, like it's the same thing. they're not. Somebody eventually is not going to be able to pay the insurance on it.
So speaking of companies that are custodying their own Bitcoin and that gives them, I keep talking about BitMEX, but I think that this story is kind of underreported. The fact that BitMEX not only is under attack by the U.S. government, but it's still in operation. And what is enabling them to be in operation and to kind of like have this breathing room is the fact that they're 100% on Bitcoin. And the fact that their Bitcoin can't be seized, that they can continue to process withdrawals and operate their business, that is 100% because of Bitcoin. And Bitcoin, as well as a combination of jurisdictional arbitrage, really makes them a sovereign company. And I mean, if we go to like the end result of companies buying buying Bitcoin on their balance sheet, if some of them do custody it and maybe they rub up against governments in ways that they previously had to kind of comply, all of a sudden, what if a Google can, just say F you to the EU? What if an Apple can do the same thing to China? Like, we don't know. We've never had that situation before. And if these guys do adopt Bitcoin, it really does kind of give them a new ability to be sovereign.
Did you see the Coinmetrics report and how they were like showing off kind of like their custody model, who had the keys and like every kind of, I think, sign that they did?
No, I haven't seen that.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. Since I think 2014 or 15, they haven't missed a withdrawal because they were doing the batch withdrawals, but they have a 3 or 4 multi-sig. And so you can like kind of infer, who's actually locked up, who's signing and all that based on like, they know who has the keys. The one thing that they didn't touch on that didn't get talked about was like, you can have redundant keys, right? So you can have 2 keys for the same multi-sig. So, Arthur could have a backup that nobody knows has a key and he could be signing. But it was just interesting to see, like, to your point, a sovereign Bitcoin only company can't hold them down, right? Like, you can figure out a way to actually get the Bitcoin deposited and they're still operating as usual while somebody was like locked up in federal custody.
When that was going down, I had this bit of conspiracy theory moment that made me pretty bullish, but didn't play out that way. But if you were the federal government and you wanted to acquire a large stack of Bitcoin, if you managed to detain 3 of those key holders at the same time, you might be able to screw up their life and totally stop their life long enough to obtain their keys and take possession of that Bitcoin, which is sort of something that's possible if the government decides to get really aggressive in the future about acquiring a safety stack. Very, very questionably legal, of course, but something that we should watch out for.
The government would never do anything illegal.
Exactly.
Well, they could just hold you in contempt until you sign something, right? Or,
right.
And so that there is that possibility, and people will have to. I mean, that is civil disobedience, and you'll have to take one for the team. Coming back to the insurance question, some insurance policies might have like it's null and void if you go to the United States. If you set foot on U.S. soil, your insurance policy is null and void. There's some crazy stuff that can happen with this, and it's really exciting to think about these type of possibilities. Also, in there's a price for everything. So if you're wanting to insure $7 billion or 17 billion, what was Coinbase's balance? $17 billion worth of Bitcoin, then you just pay a higher premium. So it's cost of doing business for a lot of these people, and they're going to have a rude awakening because the traditional financial system has been able to offer this stuff at discounted rates because they own the system, and the system is so corrupt and it's so centralized. But as soon as we get to a decentralized system, the costs of securing your Bitcoin and insuring your Bitcoin, it's going to be a rude awakening for a lot of people. It's going to drive the financial industry out of business to a large degree.
Yeah.
The first person who defies the state and essentially tells them to fuck off when they demand their keys, it's just going, and then the state can't confiscate their Bitcoin. It's going to just reinforce Bitcoin's value so much more. It's going to be a great moment. I mean, I'm not rooting for that moment to happen, but it's going to be a good thing.
See, I take what you said, Ansel, in a completely different direction, which is, the only thing I can think of is AIG 2007, where you've got that insurance contract that, doesn't pay out and ends up being this giant mess that could take the whole system down, kind of thing. Like, would that even be something that could put a dent in the U.S. dollar? I have no idea. Maybe that's a bit of a bold thing since the U.S. dollar is just so global. But, if you had a crazy scenario where basically, the exchange rate between the US dollar and Bitcoin is like predicated on some, I don't even know where I'm going with this, but basically like some sort of crazy moment where all of a sudden, you've got to make up for a huge amount of stolen Bitcoin. And you just can't do it.
Mount
yeah,
Gox.
like a Mount Gox. If there was insurance for Mount Gox.
Yeah, 75% of the liquidity, 800,000 coins were stolen. I mean, yeah, if something like that happened today, it could be another existential crisis. Oh, absolutely. But it wouldn't crash. I mean, it
something
just
like that happened today.
Go ahead.
I mean, that's how much Coinbase has roughly right now, right? If this was to happen with Coinbase, this would be a hell of a modern test for Bitcoin.
Yeah, it would be almost better if they had some sort of dead man switch to just burn those coins or something, But
would it be better?
Well, yeah, it'd be better for my stack. That's for sure.
I don't
It'd be
know.
better if you don't use Coinbase.
Yeah, well, everyone
True,
on this
yeah.
call feels that. Okay, but so Michael Flaxman has been pushing this, like, if like lots of people losing their coins isn't better for our stack. Like that makes Bitcoin unusable, like to some degree. The fact, like, if today, like, that larger percentage of the supply, got burned, I think that would be a very negative thing for Bitcoin's value prop. I think one of the reasons why people like Michael Saylor are pounding the drum on it is because it is a lot more accessible to custody it in a much more assuring way, and that Bitcoin has become a lot more approachable through education and through the technological aspects in the UX aspects. So I feel like sometimes Bitcoiners root for coins to get lost or burned, or Satoshi to burn his coins or whatever. But like coins that are on the market today, and them just a massive swath burning up, I think would be super, super negative.
That's a good point, TK. Like, there's a threshold where that turns out to be like a negative, right? We always like cheer when somebody loses their keys or whatever, or like at least say, yeah, my keys are more valuable or my Bitcoin's more valuable. But at some point, like that actually is a net negative, and then potentially, like, you think of GBTC, Coinbase, large exchanges, like that existential threat exists. There's a large portion for me, like, reason to join Unchained and be able to bring the fact that like self-custody doesn't have to be scary. Like, you can do it. There's people there to help you do it, and it makes the whole network stronger. Like, that needs to be told to everybody. And yeah, like, I mean, people they don't want to sit on Coinbase or Gemini, but the difference between taking it in their own custody and potentially losing their net worth or a portion of the net worth or leaving it there is like not worth the trade-off right now. So it's on all of us to actually, be able to make sure everybody understands that.
Definitely. So we've got another topic to cover. It's a bit timely. We wanted to kind of bring up this idea of political censorship in general, the sort of sequestering of information for some sort of means, whether it be malevolent or malicious or benevolent, who knows. So I wanted to get your guys' take. And Croesus, let's start with you on the recent, Twitter censorship of that New York Post article, and then the topic in general.
Yeah, my head is spinning on what's been happening with that, and I think it's the most acute experience I've had of being like, wow, I'm being gaslit from both sides, and I actually don't really know what to make of this anymore. I don't know where truth is in this instance, and that's a frightening experience and place to be. some of you guys, some of the listeners probably know that I come from the liberal establishment background, and that's where all my friends and IRL network is. So I'm getting all of that on one side, and then on Bitcoin Twitter, I'm getting the other side a bit more. I really don't know what to make of the New York Post story being squelched, and in contrast with the leaked tax documents of Trump being promoted by that story being promoted by big tech and social media platforms. So I'm still trying to digest it, but what it tells me is that we have reached a new level of danger and in information dissemination in our culture, and that is a trend that continues to get worse and doesn't bode well for the stability of our near future.
Michael, I see you wanting to jump in.
I was just gonna say, Crocious, like, where your real friends are, so go with like, where they're pointing the direction. Like, it's generally a good thought.
Well, I guess like on that front, like one thing that really makes me think that there's some serious corruption is the fact that it was immediately squashed, right? It wasn't even like, let's get down to the bottom of this, let's do some investigative journalism, like let's do anything to validate these. It's like, no, this is absolutely false just from the get-go. And it's not like they're going out of their way to squash obviously false stuff everywhere else. Like, it's really seems like it's kind of cherry picking what to call out and what to get in the way of. So as someone who's from California, from the Bay Area right now, and obviously have similar kind of circles to Croesus, before Bitcoin I was just heavy in the Silicon Valley tech scene. And, kind of getting both sides, like, at least I feel like I have a valid and 360 point of view on everything that's going down. But it's difficult to make, what's true and what's not. And a lot of these tech companies, a lot of these interests, they're really just giving their positions away in terms of, everyone has their bias, but it's clear that, they're in a role where they can act on their bias in a really, really massive way.
Who wasn't expecting this though? Like, I think everybody kind of knew that this type of stuff happened. It's just that it's ball face in your, right in front of you, and you can't not see that. So I think it is red pilling a lot of people to corruption in the government and in the proper way. I mean, we see all sorts of other stuff too, like like 55% of people won't take the coronavirus vaccine. They're actually questioning the medical literati, or whatever you want to call them. And so I think this is good from a real high view, zooming out. This is a good thing, but it's kind of scary if you're worried about who's going to win the election. Then it becomes scary.
I think that they were probably sitting on this information. That's the kind of shit that kills me. We're how many weeks away from the election?
Yeah,
Early
exactly.
voting's already started, and they're sitting on it until the perfect time. So, I mean, it was definitely a political motivation. But with the thing that I ultimately struggle with, I mean, I'm very apathetic to fiat politics. I know where I stand. I've done my homework, and I could care less about what happens. I know it's probably not the best stance because the fiat politics actually does affect the world around us. I get it. But I mean, that being said, I tried not to let it affect me. The thing that kind of just pisses me off, and I haven't come to terms with, is how I feel about Twitter specifically, and, them proactively censoring things. But I mean, again, the libertarian side of me is, this is a private company. They can run it however the hell they want, and it's free for me. So I'm not totally up to speed. I can't remember what the laws are about, when a media company becomes more than just media company and they start censoring things. Maybe one of you guys can speak to it. I can't remember what those rules are.
Yeah, it's Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act of 1996, and specifically, it is basically talking about how, these internet companies that they called it at the time are pipelines. Like they're the infrastructure of the internet, and therefore, as long as they behave kind of agnostically like that, they aren't liable for what is ever being, done on their platform. And the original kind of use case of this was the Google how to make a bomb. And, if someone does that and blows up a building, that Google isn't liable for the fact that they were able to get that information on Google, right? And that's kind of like the heart of this. And then, what it extends out to has been social media. But that kind of changes when all of a sudden social media is actively, intervening in the narratives that are happening kind of external to the platform itself.
Right now, they are responsible for what their people or their users are writing.
Exactly.
Once they take a proactive role in moderating or censoring political views that they might not.
Yeah, that comes back to the 2016 election, where it was, after the fact, it became very clear that there was a lot of meddling and whatever you want to call it, from foreign entities trying to influence the election. So that put big tech in this reactive position of okay, we have to address this because we'll get in trouble, and it's against our employees' political beliefs. That we allowed people to help the guy that our employees didn't want to win. So now we're feeling the fallout from all those complications.
Croesus, I think you hit a really good point a second ago that I wanted to come back to, and CK, you kind of hit it as well. But the most frustrating and like head-spinning thing for me is that it was done so fast that there wasn't even a moment for the conversation to evolve to a point where we understood the context of this, why one side says it's real and the other side says it's fake. Like, that conversation never happened. It was just immediately censored. And so by doing that, like, our ability to fact seek and truth seek was severely curtailed. And now we really have, we already did, but like we really have two separate worlds of what the truth is here. And I personally, I'm similar, like most of my friends, most of my circle run liberal, and I try and kind of be this radical independent guy, but I have no idea what the truth is. They're so sure. And I don't know what to think about any of this.
It's a good way to be crazy, is to just be the moderate down the center guy amongst a bunch of liberals. Sorry for the libs out there.
Yeah, it annoys everyone.
A guy on my Twitter
as
feed.
Bitcoiners, we all end up looking like Charlie from Always Sunny.
Yeah, a guy on my Twitter feed, he said that the act has become the story because no one really knows or cares that Biden is corrupt, because everyone knows all politicians are corrupt. The stuff that has been swept under the rug is way worse than what that Biden is being accused of here. It's just that he is a dummy and he got caught easier than everybody else. So I think that the big story that's red pilling people is that we can't trust these big media companies. You can't trust the New York Times. You can't trust Twitter. You can't trust all these people. So I like that it's breaking down these trust barriers, because you need to have a web of trust. Hopefully it gets another percentage of people into thinking about, who can you trust? What am I doing trusting the New York Times or the New York Post or whoever wrote this? It's I think it's good in the grand scheme of things. It'll wake people up.
I gotta say, I agree. I think this is a good thing. This is good for Bitcoin. A couple years ago, people who challenged common narrative, they were called conspiracy theorists. Now they're called truthers. And truthers and conspiracy theorists are open-minded to alternative views, and Bitcoin is an alternative view. If you start questioning the government about vaccinations and elections and mainstream media, I mean, you're going to eventually question money, and, super bullish on all of this. I want more people to wise up. So I think that overall, things are really shitty, but I think that people are wising up, and I'm optimistic about that.
So I want to shift the focus of this topic a little bit now. Like we're talking about obviously what happened and the gut reaction to it. The real takeaway here is that this is a communications platform. I like it. I like the beer. And it clearly could flip in an instant. And all of a sudden, I don't think Twitter's ever going to say, no more talking about Bitcoin, but we are reliant. Like, this is a single point of failure for our community. As responsible stewards of Bitcoin, what's the takeaway here for how we become even more anti-fragile? Where do we go from here? Michael, do you have any thoughts?
I mean, well, it's kind of like, all this stuff, right? The tools are being built in the background. So when things happen, we go to them. So, Telegram, I don't know. There's a bunch of like, quote unquote, decentralized applications we use or that are created for you to get off Twitter. But yeah, I mean, we're resilient. Like, I think we'll just move on to the next deal. I think there's a lot bigger fish to fry if like Twitter goes down or we all get censored, and like that brings up a larger discussion. But yeah.
Shows you why you got to host your own shit. I think part of the Bitcoin revolution is a hardware and networking revolution. And that's something that, the DeFi people, that the traditional finance people, everyone, no one is really anticipating that people will run their own hardware. And we've put ourselves in this point because everyone's on the cloud and everyone's running on someone else's hardware. So, I mean, yeah, sure, Twitter might go down. I think, like, every single person on this call, I have multiple ways of messaging them that are not necessarily dependent on Twitter. So I don't, like, it would suck, but I don't think it would be like the end or like a devastating blow onto the Bitcoin community per se. Also, I mean, the very small portion of Bitcoiners are even Western English speaking Bitcoiners on Twitter. Like, we're discounting every, South American Bitcoiner, African Bitcoiner, a lot of Asian Bitcoiners, like all of those people. That's a large swath of Bitcoiners that are not present on Twitter per se. But, ultimately, again, just to bring it back to the corn, like Bitcoin is about running your own hardware. And in the short term, while we're so dependent on these cloud-based services and these companies, it might get really turbulent, but I think that it's just that turbulent, rocky road to the final destination where, people are running their own hardware. They know the software that they're running. It's free and open source software. And really, free and open source software is being built to fulfill these means. It's just the network isn't there quite yet.
Yeah, I mean, Bitcoiners are resilient, and like all this stuff shouldn't surprise any of us, right? Like the censoring, all this crap, like it's going to come, it's going to happen. The world runs on incentives. These companies run on incentives. So where their, pocketbooks and their hands in their pockets are going to be, where they're at, that's how they're going to act. They're going to act accordingly, and we should know that. So to CK's point, like, yeah, there's people in the way in the background, our heroes that are going to figure things out, and we'll be there and we'll communicate. Things will go on. Parker from the team, he talks a lot and he goes on podcasts, and it always ends up somewhere through the discussion about the doomsday scenario and all that. And I've always appreciated how he talks about, like, we have to look at the end of the tunnel, right? Or like the positives and what we're all working on and the things that are happening. And so that's the good stuff that, like, ultimately we're all going to kind of figure out.
Yep. And this is sort of just a small little taste, a little dose to inoculate ourselves to the actual persecution that's coming from governments when the big fight happens.
Exactly.
I do want to take a moment though to lament poor Jack, who you can just feel in the way that he responded, like last night, where he sent out that tweet, like, we did a terrible job of explaining what just happened. Like you can just feel his company just going rogue on him, and him like being like this trapped behind the glass wall while he's watching it all happen. I don't know. That's how I envision it. But we are watching this slow moving train wreck of Twitter, like ceasing to be a company. Like they're not going to be able to exist. They are the kingmakers of the political arena. Like them and Facebook, they're so powerful that the government has been trying to figure out a way to regulate them probably for years. and they've just handed a silver platter to the government to basically say, look, you don't fit under Section 230 anymore. We're going to take control of your algos now. Thank you.
Well, why do they have to go after the company? Why don't they just go after individuals like Ross Ulbricht? I mean, he couldn't hide behind 230, unfortunately. And so, yeah, they should just go after these CEOs. Boom. Make the CEO be or go after the board members, whoever. If the government really wanted to, are you kidding me? It would be way easier to go after these social media people than it would be to go after Bitcoiners, right? So if we think that there's a Bitcoin doomsday scenario, there's definitely a Twitter doomsday scenario. So I don't know. I'm not worried about it. I think Bitcoin's uncorrelated to all this stuff. It'll just keep going, and it'll pick up the pieces.
I think you owe us some drinks, Ansel. And I'll take a sip to that too.
You're rocking
Cheers.
Bud Light over
Cheers.
there, guys.
Bud Light, no.
Yeah.
We're the finest, huh?
Oh,
That's
Christian.
brand's choice, of course. No, Ansel's
For-
drinking the good stuff. He has that Voodoo Ranger or something.
Yeah, yeah.
Forgot my beer. I didn't get the memo. I was pulling the Odell with the cork
Well,
the
it's all
cork prop.
good.
That's all.
It's a
That's
Christmas.
just that's distilled beer. It's fine.
I just finished my first Lagunitas, so I'm feeling it. So I'm ready to talk.
Let's go. Well, I'm a big fan of Lagunitas IPA. Do you guys want to keep talking about this, or should we transition into a more technical Bitcoin talk?
Let's go back to the corn. The politics just piss people off.
Yeah. So, I mean, today was a pretty big day in Taproot moving forward. It was merged into Core. Obviously, the activation path has not been paved, or there's no real consensus around that quite yet. So, Taproot is not activated in Bitcoin, but it is officially in the main implementation, and things are advancing. Just to kind of differentiate Taproot from previous more kind of contentious upgrade SegWit, this was celebrated. No one was. I didn't see anyone saying like, "No, you damn Core, overlords pushing Taproot down our throats." So I get the sense that Taproot's just gonna get activated, and there may be even a new narrative around upgrading Bitcoin. Who knows? But I'm curious to get your guys' thoughts about this moment and what you're thinking about regarding Taproot, Bitcoin, and future upgrades. Let's go to Joe.
Yeah, I mixed thoughts. It's super technical, and I don't think that I fully understand all the implications, although I've listened to quite a few podcasts about it. So I think it's still going to take some time for the average user to understand. And I'm curious how quickly it'll be adopted. I mean, from what I understand, some of the things I've listened to, SegWit is still obviously not 100% adopted. So I think that we've got a long time before the implications take hold. But I mean, I'll be upgrading my node as quickly as possible. But I think that probably someone else can shed some better light on the implications of Taproot.
Croesus, you have any thoughts?
Well, my first thought is that I'm out of my depth when it comes to these technical things. But I guess CK, you brought up a really interesting point of this is a pleasant change in Bitcoin development of there's actually just sort of consensus that this is a good idea and that this will be a valuable addition to Bitcoin. And I wonder what that means for ossification. That's one topic that I find interesting with regard to this is how many more significant upgrades do we get before Bitcoin is too big to risk doing anything to it. And so I wonder if there is consensus around this and it's not a acrimonious fight, that maybe that pushes ossification out a little bit further, because we might be able to harmoniously work towards more upgrades. I wonder.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to think that that's a key difference between this and the narrative that was set after SegWit, which was that Bitcoin's impossible to upgrade. That was a pain in the ass that took so long. But I mean, again, let's knock on wood, but that might just completely 180, right? Let's go over to Michael. Looks like you're itching to talk.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not on the technical side. So the two things that I want to say is shout out to like the Austin Bit Devs teams right now. They're sitting down, Ben Carmen and Justin Moon. They're all sitting in real life, eating barbecue, or probably before eating barbecue, or chatting about this exact topic, and are actually probably getting a little more technical into the weeds. But the second part is just like from a privacy standpoint, I think it's really interesting. Just purely on the whole transparent base layer, there's no fungibility, all that discussion. This is just my perspective, but like long term, I think people, especially like the Ro Pauls of the world and these people that are moving into the space, they think that it's always going to be like that. And I think that slowly, gradually, then suddenly that, at some point you'll get more of that privacy that governments weren't always thinking that was there. So I think this is like on that progression to get there.
So privacy sneaks up on governments. Interesting take. I mean, it does seem that Bitcoin, it's not like it's going to become 100% private all at once, but it's like incremental improvements. So it could see, everyone just like, yeah, Bitcoin's great. It's this transparent ledger, whatever. We're not going to regulate it, and then all of a sudden, it does turn into this like digital e-cash that the cypherpunks are dreaming of.
Exactly.
It already could be there, right? But it definitely seems like there's some privacy issues. I think maybe we're all out of our depth when it comes to the actual technical aspects of it, but I think the social aspects are maybe more appropriate for this conversation. If you are interested in the technical aspects, earlier today, Bitcoin Magazine did do an interview with Andrew Polstra, Chris Belcher, and Adam Gibson. So 3 super technical, super instrumental developers in Bitcoin. So check that out. It's on our YouTube and Twitter page as well. But yeah, regarding like, let's go back to ossification. Is ossification is that something that's a good thing? Jeremy Rubin, core developer, would push back and say like, no, there's so much to do in Bitcoin. Like, as soon as we let's not talk about ossification anytime soon. Like, how do you guys feel about ossification, Ansel?
I think it's a good thing. I hadn't really thought about the ease of this soft fork in that respect. I mean, I think that's a really interesting point. But this soft fork is different than the last soft fork, right? The last soft fork wasn't just an upgrade to Bitcoin with SegWit. It was a hard fork war. It was a war against a hard fork. I think that was 75% of the contention was the hard fork that was looming, the hard fork option, people trying to take over. This gets into the political aspect. So the difference is between this soft fork and the last soft fork is just simply that there's no political opposition. And I think that's very interesting and probably a good development politically.
This has been on the table for a while. I mean, if you follow the IRC channels, the guys, I mean, it's over my head exactly everything he does, but I do know that they have been talking about this and hashing it out. I mean, this has been on the table for quite a while. And in some of those IRC threads, some of the core developers are saying, look, like, we don't need to wait so long for our true enemies to build a case to try to, politically divide us. We need to get on the activation path sooner than later. So, I mean, I think that if the network wants it, like, let's get on the activation path sooner than later. Again, like you said, I have not seen any red flags anywhere. I mean, I literally haven't seen anything. But regarding the ossification path, that's a good point. I think it's a good buzzword that people can grab onto. Ossification, it's harden the protocol and makes it sound like it's stronger because you can't fuck with it. At the same time, if the core devs are saying there's a lot that needs to be improved and fixed, maybe we should listen to some of the smart guys.
Yeah, I literally know nothing about fucking ossification or HTTP or HTTPS and how many times that's changed over the past 20 years. All I know is if we plan on Bitcoin being around for hundreds, if not thousands of years, like after 12 years, are we ready to just like call it not quits, but just say like, hey, we're good. Like let's move on. We got the base layer. That just gives me pause that we probably have more work to do.
The protocol will never ossify. I agree.
Oh wow, interesting.
I didn't say it never ossify. I didn't say it never ossify. I just
I'll say it.
I think that 12 years in probably is maybe a little bit premature.
I'll take the other side of that. So if I imagine Bitcoin at gold's market cap, $10 trillion. At that point, we will have had large money moving in, having a big stake in it, and it's hard to imagine. There will be some entities who have $100 billion sitting in Bitcoin. It's hard to imagine a world where you would be willing to risk, 0.01% chance of a soft fork screwing something up, unintended way, and that risk would then become something that you would want to avoid at all costs if you expect to continue to grow the total value of Bitcoin, and go more mainstream. Like if you want Warren Buffett to believe that Bitcoin is safe and trustworthy, you're going to need Bitcoin to have not changed for a decade, by that point in time. That's just how the mainstream tech, Luddite type people think and feel, more of a feeling really than anything. So I see it as an adoption, a hindrance to laggard adoption, is keeping Bitcoin changeable.
So if I were to take the opposite viewpoint, I would say, there's a couple things that I hold in my mind. First and foremost, one of Bitcoin's key value props is that what it really is its decentralized consensus. And in order for ossification to happen, you would have to assume that decentralized consensus never changes, that you'll never have changes in taste, which is, an unsettled economic question about whether or not, you're getting into like gauge theory and that kind of crap at that point. But I don't think that the science is settled on that in and of itself. And then on top of that, there will always be these existential threats to Bitcoin that we have to be able to execute on, whether it be, SHA-256 getting cracked, quantum computing, insert buzzword here, right? That may or may not ever happen. But the ability to adapt to that and the ability to change with, a measured amount of quickness is part of what Bitcoin's value prop is. I mean, if we let it ossify to a point where it cannot change, then it will fail. It will have to fail, because anything that doesn't change has to fail eventually. The market changes. It has to.
Can
I follow up on that? But I'm actually going to sort of argue your point. I think that you're right. I think that this is sort of, I bet this is a conversation that the American founding fathers had about the Constitution. Is it ossified, or is it a living document that we can update and change? And the truth is that a code of rules to govern a country should be relevant to how that, the conditions that country is facing, and need to change accordingly. But in order for everybody to be on board with the idea of the Constitution, it had to ossify in order to get the laggards on board, and then things stagnate and you get stuck in putting the past on a pedestal. And that's a risk. That's a danger that Bitcoin faces. It's actually sort of a problem when ossification happens, because Bitcoin is no longer able to react to the risks that pop up. So you're totally right, and yet at the same time, I feel that there's a large portion of the world who will feel more comfortable with Bitcoin if it is "quote unquote" ossified. So it's a problem that we're
Can I
going to
jump in real
have to
quick?
face.
So I don't think of Bitcoin as like Bitcoin is ossified, right? There are certain aspects of Bitcoin that can ossify. It's just like, am I ossified as a human male? Like, yeah, okay, but I'm constantly updating my cells. I'm constantly growing. I'm constantly changing over time. And unfortunately, because I'm organic, I'm decaying. But the Bitcoin network doesn't really decay. The Bitcoin network is not, is not constrained to biology. But everything else about it, like every computer in its system is being refreshed. Every node is at some point going to go out and get, and be replaced by another node. Like the network itself is changing. And even the network level rules, like those are constantly being tinkered with. It's just like the core consensus laws, rules of engagement to stay on the same rules. Those things have currently been ossified, and other aspects of Bitcoin are slowly being ossified, over time. But I just, I disagree with the notion that it's all or nothing, right? It's either completely fluid or it's completely ossified. I just think that's a spectrum. It always has been a spectrum, and I would say from day one, it's been 21 million. That's been ossified since day one.
Yeah, and I also, to your point, like I don't think it needs to be ossified for like the laggards or people to join in. Like the monetary system for the United States wasn't ossified. We like in 2008 just started printing a bunch of fucking money, and like people just still use the dollar. So the fact that like there's soft forks and upgrades like I don't think will keep people from using a system. I think will keep people or will make people use a system or not is as their dollar decays, as they look in a bank account and it sits there and it costs more to buy goods, and this other asset just keeps going up or keeps going up relative to the goods that they can buy. So yeah,
I agree. I think that it's better that Bitcoin can continue to change pieces of itself. CK, it's a great distinction that there are pieces that can change. I guess I'm afraid of how humans tend to ossify around things when they become too big to fail. Rules can't change because we have too much riding on this.
I mean, just to really play devil's advocate and make some people very angry, I will argue the 21 million hard cap ossification. One thing that we talk about is, Bitcoin infinitely divisible, right? But Bitcoin's not infinitely divisible. It's to the 1/100 millionth of a Bitcoin. And there's, mathematical reasons why it's 1/100 millionth due to, like the bit size and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not a technical guy. I don't understand it all the way. But we may come up to a point where it's easier for us to change to double everyone's amount of Bitcoin in their wallet, make the hard cap 42 million. And that way, we can divide Bitcoin in half, like a stock split. There's a scenario where hyper Bitcoinization happens and the entire value of the universe, or at least our speed of light limited hash power limit, is valued in Bitcoin. And at that point, can 21 million Bitcoin divided by 100 millionth accurately be the base unit by which to measure everything in that we can see? I don't know. So
Yes.
Pardon?
Yes.
Can it though?
Yes.
So, but like all the way down to the atoms in the
Yes.
in the world.
Tokens.
See, I
baby.
just think I think that being able to have that flexibility and understand that the system can adapt to extenuating circumstances is part of what makes it powerful. And it requires decentralized consensus. It requires people to have at least combated the Byzantine fault tolerance or whatever it is. But sorry, I really butchered that. But I mean, like, these are the things that we have tried, the game theories we've tried and solved, but still kept the ability to change the system as a social consensus mechanism. And so that is part of Bitcoin's power.
I hate the word social consensus.
Well, it is.
I fucking hate it.
The
Now
rules
those
Yeah,
are
I mean,
nodes.
if you want to upgrade to 42 million, you're free to do so, but no one else is going to do it for you. No one else is going to follow you down that path. You can use a token. I see a future of like, okay, so we go from some world reserve currency to another world reserve currency, and now there's a period of 200 years where there's other reserve currency. So just do a token on top of Bitcoin or on a side chain on Liquid, whatever, right? And you can change the rules however you please. But Bitcoin itself will never hard fork. Now, the only reason why it would hard fork is if there's an existential crisis. And then you don't need planning for it. Like if there's some sort of SHA-256 bug or whatever, then it will be an instantaneous shift to another algorithm. So and that's different than like planning a hard fork. We're going to do Bitcoin 2.0, and it's going to be in 8 phases, including phase 0 that doesn't mean shit, and all this other stuff. So that's never going to happen. Okay, Bitcoin is never going to hard fork to something else. People might migrate to a new hashing algorithm, but that would be natural, and that's the only way that it would hard fork.
Which, to your point, is you're taking the UTXO set in the account, like the model, and you're moving just it over to a new like algorithm, but you don't change the 21 million. You don't change the amount of Bitcoins people have or get.
Right, and it's a question of zero or like non-existence or continuance, and that's the only way Bitcoin will ever hard fork. It's not like there's going to be a choice or a social consensus. We're going to come to a social consensus of 95% that we're going to move to something else. That's never going to happen. It's going to be nothing or continuance.
Yeah, Brandon,
So-
I got to get you in touch with my colleague Phil Geiger, because all 21 million exists to him, and so he'll kind of share some of his thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, there's a fundamental question of, will anything ever be worth less than 1 sat? Ever. And if your
Token.
answer is it's possible,
Use
then
a
it
token.
has to also be possible for us to be able to divide that sat.
Well, you can go to millisats on the Lightning Network already.
Yeah, Lightning
so
can do
layers
it.
above Bitcoin can, without any change, go below.
Well, sure, but then you're not using Bitcoin base layer. You're using a different security set of rules.
Can't we stop?
Well, I mean, I think it's known that, like, or not known, but there's the common theme that, like, the base layer won't be you won't necessarily use it for day-to-day transactions from like a SAT perspective. You won't like have to, and I don't know how this all plays out. None of us do, but like it's a common thought that you won't, Bitcoin moving around from a global settlement layer won't be used from the day-to-day person, 100, 200 years from now to buy coffee with 1 SAT. That's an edge case where we still end up in a like much better world, and this, all ends up where you want to be, and you don't need to use a SAT or a millisat.
Here's something to think about too, right? Is like there's technology being built today where you don't even move UTXOs in order to utilize the UTXO. Like you can have payment channels within the UTXO. So like we may go to a world where, UTXOs are like freaking yapstones or rice stones on the island, and everyone's just looking at the freaking ledger and be like, that one's mine, and they have some sort of cryptographic way to prove it, and then they're transferring it around and they're switching it around, and UTXOs are never freaking moving. So how Bitcoin's going to scale, it's beyond everyone's imagination. No one knows.
Which is why you need to be able to change the consensus rules.
You can always soft fork. No, but like Mars is going to need their own sidechain, right? They won't be able to settle with us. So
Well, Drew has some ideas about that.
I
Mike.
cannot wait until the economic war that happens between the Martian colonies and the Earth colonies. It's going to be so lit. It'll be America 2.0.
What's that Amazon Prime series?
Say it again.
What's that that dramatized series? I think it's Amazon Prime about the colonies and the outer belt and whatever.
The Belters fighting.
The Belters.
haven't seen
Expanse.
The Expanse. That's
Yeah.
it.
Should we watch
I'm
it?
watching it with my daughter right now. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
great.
this is literally
great show.
what you're dreaming of. So you should watch that.
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
And anyone have
Yeah,
some
a little
cosmic
like-
ideas about Bitcoin?
it's a little like Star Trek was self-fulfilling prophecy as well, right? With the communicators and all that stuff. So yeah, I agree. Hopefully it gets to be popular.
I've been on a cosmic kick the last couple months about something that I don't think gets enough attention with Bitcoin. In shelling out in Szabo's post about history of money, he slips in a little point there about 75,000 years ago is the earliest evidence of shell money, and that that's from like early Homo sapiens like cave sites, and then Neanderthal cave sites from the same time period don't have any evidence of money, of shells or anything else. And the implication he slips in is that the reason that Homo sapiens were able to support 10 times the population density was because of having an appreciation for money, aka an appreciation for scarcity, manifested as valuing shells, and that makes Bitcoin the 0 to 1 moment from going from appreciating physical scarcity, which is the defining characteristic that allowed our species to overcome Neanderthals and any other early Homo sapien group, and that Bitcoin is then the first massive shift in that evolution of physical scarcity, now jumping to the digital realm. And when I zoom out and I think about scarcity as like the defining human characteristic, the thing that allowed our species to succeed, I've been having cosmic brainwaves about that recently. So I just wanted to share my enthusiasm for that.
Croesus, you should talk to the CEO of Bitcoin Magazine, David Bailey. I feel like he shares very similar mental models for Bitcoin and the potential that Bitcoin has. He always actually says that the real party starts after hyper-Bitcoinization. It's not after hyper-Bitcoinization where we figure out what this thing actually does to the world and humanity.
Love that.
It's a good call.
I think Will Reeves had a point of Bitcoin is the obelisk in 2001 Space Odyssey. If you guys have seen that, where one of the earliest scenes in that movie is it's just a bunch of chimpanzees basically at their campsite, and an obelisk descends out of nowhere from the aliens, and in trying to understand the obelisk and what it means for them, it imparts on them the idea of using tools, and that's the genesis of human evolution. And Bitcoin is the same thing. We're still trying to figure out what the hell it means, and it is changing us in the process.
Well, we really are getting cosmic.
Antle, you talk about this a lot too. Like you talk about like productivity is going to come from Bitcoin where it's dying in the traditional system, that the world is going to reorganize around this system.
Yeah, well, I want to take it cosmic on the evolutionary path here. I'm big into this new book. You guys should probably check it out if you haven't, The Revolutionary Phenotype. And it talks about so for example, DNA took over from RNA, and what's going to take over from DNA. DNA life forms will be the slaves of the next thing. And so anyway, I think it's very interesting to go from what Croesus was saying with physical scarcity to digital scarcity, because that digital scarcity is really all in our mind, right? I mean, we can test it by going out into the physical world and trying to send a bad transaction and see if digital scarcity is real. But what defines it kind of is it's a mental concept of math and digits and all these other things. So yeah, I think it's very fascinating on how this could take us to some sort of next evolutionary leap even of humans.
Straight to the machines.
Yeah.
Is Bitcoin how machines take over human civilization though? Because now they can play around with money too, autonomously.
No.
One of my early thoughts about investing in cryptocurrencies back when I was still interested in altcoins was that, when I imagined a future world, after a singularity event, machines are not transacting in dollars or anything physical. That's for sure. They need a digital money. So maybe we're just growing Bitcoin for the machines to use.
Yeah, but
Yeah, I mean, there's a case to make that Bitcoin already take over us.
True. Yeah, I think that AI will still need money because of the price structure. I think the market is even too complex since it's subjective mostly, and I guess maybe machines won't have subjectivity. I don't know, but
You say machines plural too. Maybe it will just
Yeah.
be one, and then
Yeah.
there won't be subjectivity because it is just one.
Aren't
Yeah, but if
markets, in fact, necessarily too complex to be able to be calculated correctly by the participants in said market?
yes,
Isn't that-
because it's subjective.
Right.
Yeah, but yeah, that's a good question. If it's one or multiple machines, I still think that there is because the real world or resources out there, physical resources have scarcity. That you need some other thing like money that is going to be able to balance real other scarcity. So everything is scarce at a certain price, and so I think even AI will need money.
Or energy.
Pierre said that Bitcoin is proof that time travel does not exist. Thoughts?
Why? Because they would have gotten rich as fuck on Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think that's why he didn't expand on it, but that's what I'm thinking.
Well, Satoshi's rich, right? So that isn't. Satoshi could be from the future.
Oh no doubt.
Yeah, I actually like Aaron Van Wordum, writer at Bitcoin Magazine. One of his funnier theories is that Satoshi is Hal Finney from the future, and that he, before he died, memorized his seed phrase, knowing that he would be able to be resurrected once ALS is cured and have the money from Bitcoin in that future to be able to invent backwards electronic travel, time travel, for him to then go talk to himself in the past and bring him to Bitcoin.
That's
That's
like
out there. Love it.
Back to the Future right there.
I'd watch that movie. That's for
He's-
sure.
Yeah, for sure.
For those of you that don't know, he is cryo frozen. His body is.
Oh, is he? I did
Yeah.
not know that.
Let's go.
It's
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
technically
That's a
plausible.
fun story. Yeah.
Yeah,
Bullish.
maybe like Roger Ver or Brock Pierce is a time traveler then, huh?
Brock Pierce becomes the president. Watch out.
Ansel, are you watching that movie?
No, I'm not watching that movie. That's X-rated. I'm not watching that.
Well, guys, one thing that I like to think about is, if we're still going the galaxy brain side of things, is what happens when, Elon likes to talk about how we have to get off this planet, like we're all bugs on a rock flying through space, and like one big ball, kills us all. How do we build a galactic economy, or at least a multi-planetary economy, using Bitcoin? And I just wanted to throw out one thought that I'd been munching on, for a little bit, which is that you'll have a calculation of a center of hash, like somewhat similar to a center of mass, where if you just have two, clusters of nodes, one on Earth and one on Mars, then you would have necessarily a war between them, because you would have selfish mining attacks happen all the time. Due to the time that it takes, like 12 minutes or 11 minutes for light to go from Earth to Mars, which is longer than a block time. So you would need there to be a concentration of hash power somewhere in the middle of Earth and Mars in order to accurately distribute the network so that it could work on both places. Otherwise, it would work on either place, and they would have like economic warfare go back and forth. Has anyone ever thought about that before, or am I
I'm
just
thinking, how the hell could that work? Because the orbits of the planets,
Yeah,
They're not always the same distance away from each other.
Yeah, I mean, it had to be moving.
That's a challenge problem, but I kind of with Ansel that they'll just function on some kind of side chain.
Why would you want to be relegated to the side chain?
Why would it be relegation if it's? Yeah, I guess. Right.
A side chain is a blockchain. They have their own blockchain.
Well, then which one is the side chain at that point?
You really got to watch The Expanse.
I guess
Well,
I do.
I guess it would be. I mean, it all comes down to hash power because side chains would be federated, and so that would be. I mean, if we're getting real cosmic, right, and we're talking about like expanse stuff where there's multiple governments on multiple planets and all this junk, then the federation of the side chain would be like the government of Mars or something, and the U.S. or the Earth would be the main chain. So you could never get away from Earth. Earth would always have you on a leash.
Well, isn't it part of? I shouldn't say this. Like, I haven't read like Drew's the hash power piece, but like essentially you can't transfer Bitcoin to other planets. So the idea is you have to have your own Bitcoin, or I'm sorry, your own blockchain with its own hash, like on Mars in itself, because you couldn't like actually do transfer. You could do the mining, I think, but you couldn't actually transfer. So I think it's
the other way. You can't
Yeah,
mine,
it's the other way
but you
around.
can make transactions.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think that's
it's,
right.
I think it's
And-
because you can't compete with, like, let's say you found
You can't
the next
propagate
block.
fast enough.
You can't communicate that fast enough.
Yeah, so Bitcoin would be completely, relegated to like Earth. While
Bitcoin
some
mining
other-
would be.
But I think even like with the transactions, because you would have another network that would be operating on a different planet. So
Well,
how
could
would you
still
actually be?
transaction because
Then you
You
just
would just-
settle up once an hour, you know?
yeah, it would just be slower on-chain transactions.
Well, it could also be that Mars might start their own immaculate conception of their own chain, and then
Well,
there'll be
that's one of his
Yeah.
thesis is that Bitcoin mining will drive human expansion to competing solar systems because people will want to be able to have a Genesis block moment. They will have each solar system have its own blockchain. And so that will drive expansion to alternate solar systems.
that is brilliant. I agree with that.
So
Yeah, I
here's a
think the
thought.
economic coordination between like all of us to actually make this happen is what Bitcoin provides, right? It's like that one metric system to do that is
It
the
doesn't
0
start
to
till
1
hyper
kind of-
Bitcoinization, man. But here's a thought too, right? Like, so for example, like Europe is kind of ossified in a much more ancient form than the infrastructure in the United States, and then you go over to Asia and parts of China with brand new cities, and they're so much more modern from the ground up. Like, are we gonna, be in a future where, sure, we're on the OG human planet, we have the OG sound digital money, and then someone starts like the future, the future Bitcoin, and has their own Genesis block on some other planet, and it is just like the next level of technology, like 200 years into the future, post hyper Bitcoinization, like they're on some next level networking shit, and then you look back at Earth like, man, we're on some old infrastructure, like we're built on, like we're the Europe of the hyper galactic human civilization.
Well, and to your point, CK, going back to the whole Mars having a different chain than Earth, if I had the option, I'd be buying Mars coin because Mars will be able to they have all this space there. They have access to be able to just create nuclear power and totally circumvent so many of the kind of shortcomings that we have. They would kill us in the hash power race very quickly, and therefore the economy would be oriented around Bitcoin. And you would assume then that their economy would be stronger than Earth's economy, which means that their Bitcoin would be stronger than our Bitcoin and more valuable. So and that's why I don't think that there can be two competing coins. It'll always be like a war because everyone's going to flock to whatever is the more valuable coin.
A picture that I think of with the scene that I said earlier, how it would drive expansion to other solar systems. I can remember if it's like Dances with Wolves or one of those plantation movies when the family's like racing out on the prairie and they have to like drive the stake in the fucking ground. And they're like, "This is my land." That's kind of the scene that I picture as humans start pioneering on the galactic frontier to get their mining operations going.
That's how Oklahoma Sooners got their name. Oklahoma was opened up, midnight on a particular day, and people would go stake out their land. But people who jumped the border before that official moment in time were Sooners.
Ah, always wondered that. That's good.
They're outlaws, those sons of bitches.
That's why I don't trust them.
You're right next to him, right?
Those bastards. Yeah.
Well, they'll have to be financing for these missions, right? So,
That's what I was gonna say.
the interest rate for the loan, like when you talk about the new world, so the Spanish or the Portuguese are going on their age of exploration and stuff. I mean, they were owned by the Genoese pretty much. They were lock, stock, and barrel. The Genoese owned all of the sugar cane. They owned all the slaves or whatever. And so I think that will probably be something similar to that. So Bitcoiners, like the OG Bitcoiners today, will still have a say in that future.
Which actually, this is a little bit unrelated, but somewhat related, is why I think it's interesting with the people that recognize what's going on, or the people that matter, and the people that don't, or kind of they're sowing what they may, in the sense that, like you get in those conversations. We've all been in them with people that don't like listen, or you just like, all right, you finally realize like in the long scope of this whole thing, you shouldn't have actually had the coin. You shouldn't have actually had the gains, because where we're going and what the world needs maybe doesn't necessarily need that kind of like mindset. So to your point with this whole kind of expansion and growth, that's kind of like the way I've thought about a lot of this, is the world is in a certain place. And as it moves further, the people that actually have control and power will be the people that actually you want to have control and power.
This is natural selection.
It's true. It's like it's what they say. It's the greatest, you always hear like from the boomer crowd, the greatest wealth transfer the world's ever seen is coming in like 2029 from a pure like boomer aging, giving their money over.
Finally,
and then you hear it all. Well, yeah, finally giving it up. But then you hear it from like the Bitcoiner side, like you're going to see the largest wealth transfer that the world's ever seen. And so it's an interesting like dichotomy where something has to give, right?
It's the same wealth transfer.
It's the same wealth transfer, and then that's like the beauty in this whole thing, right? It's like the people that it resonates with, and the people that are actually the ones that are adopting, are the people that you actually want to engage with, you want to see be leaders in society, and potentially create these whatever fucking spaceships that are going to take us wherever you guys want to go.
Are boomers going to benefit from Bitcoin though? Not to change, and Ansel, if I'm changing the subject on you, then we can turn it back to what you're going to say.
I was just going to say, everything aligns so perfectly. I mean, some things make me question free will, because, we just are in the right place or Bitcoin is in the right place at the right time. And it couldn't have happened in another, previous era. I think it's almost like this was bound to happen. If it didn't happen in 2008, it would have happened in 2012, and then we would be a few years behind where we are now. But it's it just makes you question and this actually affects my political thinking, like why I don't care about who wins the election, because I feel like as a hive mind of humanity, it's just going to go where it wants to go. Individuals don't really matter in the grand scheme of things. They matter to your offspring and your family and your neighbors, but not to the grand scheme of history. The broad brush of history doesn't care about you. It has its own mind, and it's going to go where it wants to.
So two parts to that, like the political side. I never was political. I started getting into this, picking a side after seeing what's going on, and I'm not even going to say which side I'm on, but like essentially the thought is, and I've heard this from like well-known Bitcoiners, that there's one side that if they're in power, we're going to see everything burn down. Bitcoin's going to moon, but it's going to be a lot quicker. And we're not going to allow people to actually get access to Bitcoin. And then there's the opposite side. We're going to get 4 more years. Bitcoin's still going to fucking moon, but it's going to like allow it to decentralize and more people to get access. And it's going to be a smoother transition. So I think that's a component. But a question for you guys is, we're all Americans. Where do you see in the United States being, like you think of Wall Street as the financial hub of the world because of the legacy system? It looks like these big cities may be torn to shreds, right? Like the mainstream media doesn't cover it, but I feel like a lot of places people are running, whether it's a business that's going to close down, whether it's people's insolvency because their deferment in 2021 is going to come up and they can't pay for it. Rich people don't want to live in places like that. So what's going to be open? Where are people going to go? Like, where do you guys foresee the places that are going to like flourish in the next 10 years?
I see this as all traces back to the internet, and it allows people to conduct business from wherever. So you no longer need to be in a city. Cities are just centralized entities of commerce, basically. And we can decentralize that now, so you can be wherever makes most sense for you, and that tends to be driven by regulatory arbitrage and tax arbitrage. So I think the big winners over the coming decade in terms of where people start to move to are the states that are set up with zero income tax, and places that have, that attract people from cities to a more rural existence because people are fed up with the cities.
I'd like to throw a bold prediction, just because I'm on a devil's advocate bit of a streak this show. I think that New York City should be renamed New Cantalon City, and I think New York City will be the Detroit/Cleveland of the next decade, as the U.S. dollar's place in the world eventually, maybe it's not the next decade, maybe it's another decade, but eventually starts to erode. That like New York City has very few things that it offers our society that are as big as the banking sector that's located there. And if that banking sector becomes irrelevant in a decentralized financial world, New York City becomes irrelevant. That's a bold statement, I know, and there's a lot of people who would just love to like tackle me to the ground for saying that, but there's better places to live than New York City, and it's becoming more and more of a ghost town.
Love that.
I 1,000% agree. And I've been on this kick that like Marty's been on with this whole kind of like, the oil industry and being, the new central bankers and being able to actually, take hash power and, mine coin. I think that's a big component of it, right? Like the people that are actually closest to the asset are going to be the ones that control a lot of things. So I agree with that.
I think we're going south, man. Like, like Asia was the new frontier in the 90s and the 2000s. I think Africa and South America are the new frontier for Bitcoin. Like, in terms of per capita, that's where the penetration is. In terms of the desperate need for financial infrastructure, that's where the biggest gap is. And I mean, I know that there's plenty of human rights advocates out there like, stop rooting for Bitcoin to save Venezuela. Like, there's so much more out there, but like, no one else is there for them. Bitcoin is the only one there for them. So, I mean, if I think that there's going to be a new center of civilization, I think it's going to go south from here. But if we're talking about the U.S. in particular, I think the U.S. is a great demonstration of why jurisdictional arbitrage is so important. And the U.S. is one of the very few countries in the world that is a country that in and of itself also has jurisdictional arbitrage within it. And I would actually argue that jurisdictional arbitrage is why the United States is great. It's not because of democracy. It's the fact that, hey, I can be in California, but I can set up a business in Delaware and get all of those tax benefits, right? So I can stay in my place, but I have the choice of competing jurisdictions. And I think that Bitcoin is going to flatten the entire world. and make all jurisdictions compete, and that is net good for humanity.
And Second Amendment.
Sure, well, that's what printing guns will do.
And stop the
You gotta
signal.
I think there's a lot of benefits to the United States, right? Like demographics, geography. We have the largest navigable river system in the world. We have no real enemies anywhere, defendable borders, et cetera, et cetera. And so I don't see anything like where else in the world is going to rise that has favorable demographics? Not China. China has some of the worst demographics in the world. They've never gone past, the first island chain. This is all from Peter Zion and his Disunited Nations. So I think he makes a very good argument that the U.S. is going to be the place to be in the future. Now, which state? Yeah, I think the tax-free states. I'm open to that argument. Now, I also don't think that necessarily mining a Bitcoin is going to do anything for like where the financial center is, because, New York was never a center of gold mining. Neither was London. I don't think there's any reason. It's all about trade. It's all about trade lanes. It has nothing to do with where the money is created or anything like that. So I think New York probably will fail just because it's people don't. I mean, I think population will probably spread out a little bit more evenly. And that's why maybe New York might stop being a financial center, but not because of Bitcoin or anything like that.
Well, to just push back a little bit, I don't think that New York is geographically the financial center, but from a Cantillon pathway became the financial center very quickly. And there's no reason why it would continue to be the financial center in a decentralized financial environment.
Well, it wasn't just Cantillon effects. I mean, you have the Hudson River and the Erie Canal that accessed the Great Lakes, and everything went through New York and Chicago.
Fair.
I mean, yeah. So all the great. I mean, Chicago still has the CME, right? It still has all the biggest exchange in the world is in Chicago. So yeah.
The idea is more about the financialization, right? Like in the legacy world, the financialization of capital and dollars were in Wall Street. So if you take that and extrapolate it to these miners that sit in certain bastions of the United States to potentially turn into the central banks of the new world, that actually like create the new money, and then you start, extrapolating what that actually entails. That's the idea of like you'll have these new financial hubs. Because at a certain point where Bitcoin, you don't just sell it right in an OTC desk that miners do now, where they're actually able to like get utility out of it and create new like products and financial services rather than just like sell it off.
Well, yeah, but miners will be owned by somebody far away, and they'll be in debt to somebody far away. I don't think like every rich person is going to move to the place where they're mining Bitcoin or anything like that.
But the state will. Like, so if you're in Texas and you own the grid, you own the bank in this world, right? Like China doesn't own the grid in Texas. If you're going to start mining in West Texas, like Texas potentially does, or some business there in New York, northern New York, it's not China that owns the grid. It's not somebody else. It's the like government that potentially owns it. That's the whole thesis behind like why the commodity of Bitcoin is so valuable, is because you can't like commoditize it into the ground like we just did with gold where it went negative. So it's a little bit different in the sense that it's not somebody else that owns the asset. So you start like building on top of it rather than just like mine it and then sell it off.
So you're saying the grid owner is going to own the mining infrastructure? What? I don't understand.
Well, then, like, if we're talking about whoever's closest to the actual mining of the asset will be able to create utilities, financial services, like a typical, like what we're saying with Wall Street, why they were able to do what they did because of central banking. The central bankers will be the miners of the new world.
Oh, well, no, I don't think so. I think that miners have a specialization, so they know how to access energy
For
and
now.
use. No, well, they know how to access energy and use energy. That's the division of labor. That's a very specific specialization. They don't necessarily know what lender is a better risk, right? They don't know how to design financial products or anything like that. So I think that wherever the people are that are closest to the business, that are closest to the trade lanes, that's going to be the biggest financial center, because those are the people that know that business the best.
So I have a quick question. I mean, I kind of see two of the same argument, really, is like Michael is saying that the geography of the hash rate is going to matter, and Ansel is kind of saying like the geography matters. Like whoever has the trade lanes, wherever like products are
Where
going to
the
flow,
commerce is
that's going to
happening.
matter. Yeah. So I'm kind of curious, like at what point does geography stop mattering, right? Because like if you look at something from a Citadel perspective, geography and localization matters for everything. Like maybe you want your Citadel to be in an area, you know, where you can protect it, where you can mine, and you know,
Mars.
and it's going to be somewhere that you know you can have a position where you know that no one you know can attack you. So I could see a world where you know the center of hash is just evenly distributed geographically where Earth allows it, and then people kind of hunker down in those regions and fortify it. What do you guys think about that thought?
I mean, that's what makes this whole thing interesting from game theory of like the United States or China banning it, right? It's like there's a quote that doesn't get said a lot, and he's kind of in the he's gotten exiled for a while, but Murad has this term says digital monetary nuclear weapons. And so like if you think of China or United States and like hash power and all that, you know, like you start extrapolating what it really means to send a Bitcoin somewhere and where it kind of, you know, ends up and what you try to like coordinate on hash power and you know, monetary like power from a global scale. Like it's a different dynamic completely than what we're talking about.
I miss Murad. Come back to
I
Twitter,
think-
man.
I think he stole that from Andreas. Andreas said weapons of mass financial destruction. Way back.
Really?
Yep. I think he stole that.
Well, hey, I'll throw this credit to Ansel, and you coined the, or maybe you didn't coin it, but you brought up the term, you know, like this new Cold War or Cold War 2.0, where countries instead of actually fighting, they're just hashing, right? So Bitcoin kind of is an outlet for countries to enable or to point their aggressive energies towards that is really not necessarily you know attacking or destructive to people directly.
Yeah, that's I can see that. I don't remember saying that, but also like the places where mining is going to be, that's going to be a very violent place. Like look at where oil is today, right in the Middle East. It is a hotly contested place. So I think I don't know. Trade lanes, centers of trade lanes, crosses of trade lanes that are close maybe to where the energy is. That's probably where the new financial centers will be.
Well, I mean, to finish, like, I don't know enough about this, but it just seems like logical when we hear about like oil and gas companies, right? Like they've led the universe for, you know, like the past 100 years and everything that revolves around oil and gas. And we know that we are like less reliant on them. So that's just already kind of, you know, you can extrapolate like what that means as we go more to like energy sources that are renewable. And then where do they move their kind of like power? Where do they move their grids to like actually start mining? So that's, I mean, it just really gets interesting with who's able to mine, who's able to, you know, bring in Bitcoin as the price goes up. That's where power and congregation is going to go. And then the whole state thing is interesting because the aspect of if you're not like producing, if you're not GDP positive, then why are you like part of the United States, right? Like, why are you contributing when you got this, like, you know, certain states like Wyoming's really interesting because Wyoming, like we got Cynthia Lummis up there about to be senator that she's positive for not only Bitcoin, but they're sitting on a bunch of excess mineral rights reserves where they're already Bitcoiners, right? So they're saying, hey, it seems like based on what she's saying that they're going to put a portion of their allocation to that. So it's only like a certain point where they say like, fuck everybody else. Like, we're just going to go do our own thing. You guys figure it out while you're, you know, running negative $1 billion per year. So, I mean, and then you start bringing in Bitcoiners, you start bringing in people and wealth. It just changes the whole landscape of everything we're like talking about.
If I could add one thing too, like we've jumped over one step that I love to highlight as well, which is that Bitcoin will necessarily cause people to go back to needing to create valuable things with the work that they're doing. And it's like, this system that we have today that like makes my gut wrench of like people just being able to be close to the money spigot and, just having that cachet in society and being able to live off that, while not providing anything and in fact leeching off the system is an unsustainable thing. And that's kind of how America's economy, at least a section of it, has really started to grow into, is like just our ability to dominate the world with the US dollar and how we can kind of all tailgate behind that wind. So one thing that I'm excited about is bringing back sort of the economic engine that is America's economy, and hopefully forcing valuable things like creating chips, mining, all of the financial tools around Bitcoin, all that kind of stuff like comes back, and I'm really excited about that. I'm hopeful.
You guys, I would love to keep going down on this road, but we are going almost, or I guess 2 hours and 5 minutes into this stream, and it's getting pretty late over on the East Coast. I think this is a good time to wrap it up and close it out with some last words. This was a fun and very cosmic conversation, though, and I appreciate every single one of you guys. Let's start with Croesus with the last word. We haven't heard from you, and this is your first time on the show. Thank you, and you're welcome again, man. Thanks for being on the show.
It was awesome. It was super fun. And I've never talked to Bitcoin and drank at the same time, and it's a good mix. I don't know. Last words. I don't know. I guess my only parting message would be that for everybody listening, who in your family or friend group is teetering on the edge of being open to Bitcoin and could buy some sats tomorrow, and you haven't contacted them yet. Maybe you talked to them a year ago, they weren't open to it, but things have changed. So everybody listening, who is that one person? This is how we spread it.
All right. Cheers to that. If you love your mom, she needs to be stacking. Let's go. All right, Michael, what's your last word, man?
Yeah, I guess I would echo the same thing, right? Think about who you spend your time, chill lightly, and just make sure that, the future kind of world you live in is the world that, the people are in control that you, that allocate to Bitcoin are ones that you want to be a part of it.
Cool. Ansel.
Yeah, I echo those sentiments. Thanks for having me on. I got started with my drinking during dinner and jumped in here late. Sorry. But this was really fun, and we need to get Cosmic more. I think one of the things that attracts people to Bitcoin is just the unlimited nature of it. When you look at fiat, you see stagnation and decline, and you look at Bitcoin and you see beautiful green shoots, and that's what we need to concentrate on.
Beautiful. Focus on the positive. Cheers to that. Good. Joe, why don't you close it out for us, man?
Sure. Thanks everyone for tuning in. This was a fun one. I usually don't listen back to pods that I've been a part of, but everyone on here has kind of pushed me to in my thinking, and I think there were some good snippets in this one, and you guys have kind of opened up my mind a little bit and got me thinking about some things that I'm not super haven't developed my thought process on. So thank you guys, everyone. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and thanks for having me.
All right, y'all. Bitcoiners,